When the doorbell rang that Saturday morning, I was covered in sawdust finishing up an oak sideboard for a client. I opened the door and found a woman with a stern expression and impeccable posture. "I'm Jennifer, your neighbor from the design studio. We need to talk about the access door." Confused, I raised my eyebrows. "Which door?" Subscribe to the channel and hit like to get more stories like this. "The one that connects our establishments, of course. I need it reopened immediately." Welcome to Story Slices, where I share real Reddit stories that show how some people just disregard limits and end up facing the consequences. Today's case is special. A conflict between property owners that escalated dramatically when a neighbor decided that part of my property belonged to her as well. At 42, I decided to expand my carpentry business specializing in sustainable furniture. I found an old warehouse for sale, perfect for my needs. During the inspection, I noticed a sealed door in the wall I shared with the neighboring building, a design studio. The broker explained that the buildings had been one property for decades, but were legally divided in the 80s. I went ahead with the purchase without any worries. 3 days after I moved in, Jennifer showed up demanding the door be reopened. She said that the original 1975 blueprints showed a passage, and she needed that access for photo shoots and events for important clients. "I'm sorry, but these are separate properties now. The easement doesn't exist anymore," I calmly explained. She adjusted her silk scarf and replied disdainfully, "You clearly don't understand how things work in this neighborhood. I host regular exhibitions for Elite Design magazine, and I need that extra space." I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. The next week, I arrived at work and found saw marks on the sealed door. Someone had tried cutting through it. I installed security cameras that same day. 2 days later, the cameras caught Jennifer's employees trying to enter through the back door of my property. When I called Jennifer, she answered, "My designers need to access that space to set up for our next exhibition. I'm just exercising my right." Things got worse when Jennifer parked a dumpster right against the shared wall, blocking my emergency exit. When I asked her to remove it, she laughed and said, "How about we talk about the door first?" I got in touch with my lawyer, Christopher, who suggested a topographic survey of the property. The findings were surprising. Jennifer's building encroached 15 centimeters into my property. Christopher couldn't help but smile when he saw the documents. "This completely changes things. She's demanding access to your property while she's already illegally on it." Jennifer rejected every attempt at an amicable resolution. When I suggested a meeting with our lawyers, I received an email. "I don't have time for useless discussions. Either you reopen the door in a week, or we'll meet in court." One afternoon, while my employees Jonathan and Samantha were working on a reclaimed wood dining table, we heard noise outside. Jennifer had hired a contractor to inspect the wall. The guy looked uneasy when I approached him. "She paid me to open a hole here, but this feels fishy," he confessed. My lawyer then got a restraining order to keep Jennifer and her staff from interfering on my property. Her response was to sue me, claiming I was illegally obstructing her historic right of access. The day of the trial came faster than I expected. Jennifer walked into court as if she had already won, accompanied by a lawyer who wore a worried expression. Judge Gregory, a silver-haired man with a sharp gaze, quickly picked up on the inconsistencies in Jennifer's case. When her lawyer presented the 1975 blueprints as proof of the supposed easement, the judge adjusted his glasses and asked, "And where are the documents that prove this easement was maintained after the legal division of the properties?" Jennifer's lawyer hesitated. "Well, Your Honor, the original blueprint clearly shows—" "I'm aware of what the blueprint shows," the judge interrupted. "I'm asking for legal documents that preserve this easement after the properties were separated in the 80s. Jennifer leaned forward, whispering intensely with her lawyer. Meanwhile, Christopher stayed calm by my side, our evidence file neatly organized on the table. When it was our turn, Christopher presented not only the purchase documents and updated deeds that clearly marked the properties as separate, but also the security camera footage. In the video, we clearly saw Jennifer's employees trying to force their way in, the dumpster blocking my emergency exit, and the contractor confessing he had been hired to open a hole in the wall. The judge's face tightened as the evidence piled up. When Christopher presented emails where Jennifer explicitly admitted her intentions to use my space for her commercial exhibitions without my permission, the judge took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Ma'am," he said directly to Jennifer, Are you aware that this amounts to attempting to illegally take over someone else's property? Jennifer straightened up. Your Honor, I'm a respected businesswoman in this community. For decades, these spaces functioned as a single establishment. I'm just trying to restore the historic access that benefits both businesses. Then Christopher revealed our ace in the hole, the topographic survey showing her illegal 15-centimeter encroachment onto my property. When her lawyer saw the document, he visibly paled. In fact, Your Honor, Christopher explained, while the defendant is demanding access to my client's property, her own establishment has been illegally on his property for decades. We're filing a counterclaim demanding immediate correction of this encroachment. The judge looked directly at Jennifer. Do you have any evidence to contradict this survey? For the first time since I met her, Jennifer was at a loss for words. Her lawyer tried to argue about adverse possession and acquired rights, but the judge wasn't impressed. After almost an hour of deliberation, the judge returned with his decision. He completely dismissed Jennifer's case and accepted our counterclaim. This court orders the defendant to correct the property encroachment within 90 days at her own expense. In addition, she must pay damages and attorney's fees to the plaintiff in the counterclaim and refrain from any future unauthorized access. As we left the courthouse, Jennifer approached, her face red with frustration. You don't understand who you're dealing with. I know influential people in this city. Christopher gently put his hand on my shoulder, guiding me away. My client has nothing to discuss with you outside of court. Any further communication should go through legal representatives. In the following weeks, Jennifer's nightmare only got worse. The structural engineer determined that fixing the encroachment would cost around $45,000, since part of the facade had to be rebuilt. Add to that $25,000 in damages and another $30,000 in attorney fees, and Jennifer was facing a bill of over $100,000. Daniel, my youngest carpenter, watched as the repair work began while we were working on a reclaimed wood bookshelf. Looks like she finally met someone who isn't giving in to her demands, he commented with a smile. That reminds me, said Samantha. Remember when she sent that designer here to inspect the space as if it already belonged to her? We all laughed, turning an otherwise stressful experience into something that brought our small team even closer. In a desperate bid to cut costs, Jennifer hired a cheap contractor for the structural repairs. Predictably, the work got halted twice by city inspectors for code violations. Each pause added weeks to the schedule and thousands of dollars in municipal fines. 3 months after the trial, I ran into Jennifer in the parking lot. She looked older, stress written all over her face. I'm selling the studio, she announced abruptly. Hope you're happy. I never wanted to hurt your business, Jennifer, I replied sincerely. I just wanted to protect my property and my right to run my own space. She shook her head, eyes fixed on the ground. 22 years building my reputation in this neighborhood. All undone because you wouldn't be reasonable about a door. I resisted the urge to point out the irony. I sincerely hope you find success in your next venture. With Jennifer on the way out, I decided not only to permanently seal off the old door, but to replace it with a reinforced concrete wall. Christopher joked that it was going overboard, but after months of conflict, I preferred to make sure there would never be any more questions about that boundary. 6 months later, my carpentry business was thriving. I had forged partnerships with interior designers specializing in sustainable decor, and our reputation for quality and environmental awareness was drawing clients from all over the region. The irony wasn't lost on me, the kind of collaboration Jennifer could have legitimately proposed, instead of trying to take by force. One Thursday afternoon, as I was finishing a reclaimed wood coffee table, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I met a couple in their 40s. Hi, I'm Alexander, and this is my wife Olivia. We just bought the design studio next door and wanted to introduce ourselves. I invited them in and showed them the carpentry workshop. Unlike Jennifer, they showed genuine interest in my work, asking insightful questions about sustainable finishing techniques and reclaimed wood sources. Actually, said Olivia, we were thinking about a proposal. We noticed you work with eco-friendly furniture, and our studio intends to focus on sustainable interior design. Maybe we could create a joint showroom? Of course, with proper contracts and fair payment for your space and work. I smiled, appreciating the professional approach. That sounds like an interesting partnership to explore. In the following weeks, we drew up a formal business agreement. They rented part of my space for specific exhibitions, with predetermined dates and times, and in return, showcased only my pieces in their design projects. A win-win situation built on mutual respect and proper documentation, exactly how it should have been from the start. Recently, I heard about Jennifer through a mutual supplier. Apparently, she had tried to sue her own lawyer for inadequate representation, but the case was quickly dropped. She moved to another state and now works as a real estate agent. Ironically, a profession that demands precise knowledge of properties and legal boundaries. Last week, I completed my first big order for Alexander and Olivia's new studio, a comprehensive collection of furniture for a client who was looking to completely renovate their home using only sustainable materials. Their showroom display already brought me 3 major new clients. While my story with Jennifer reached its conclusion, other equally complicated situations of overstepped boundaries keep coming to Story Slices. I'm going to share 2 stories that were recently sent to me and show how disrespecting personal boundaries can show up in very different contexts. The first comes from Emma, a 28-year-old who planned a vacation with her 3-year boyfriend Lucas. They had saved for months to visit Paris, her lifelong dream since she was a teenager. 2 days before the trip, Lucas called with surprising news. "My parents decided to join us," he said casually. "They've always wanted to see Paris and thought it'd be a great opportunity." Emma was shocked. "Lucas, we planned this trip as a special time just for us. Why didn't you talk to me before inviting your parents?" "They're my family," he replied, as if that ended any discussion. "I just can't say no to them." During the trip, Lucas constantly prioritized his parents' wishes. That romantic dinner by the Seine that Emma had booked months ago? Canceled because his parents preferred a restaurant recommended by a guidebook. The peaceful stroll through the Luxembourg Gardens? Rushed because his dad wanted to hit the Eiffel Tower right at noon. The situation climaxed on the last night in Paris, when Lucas announced he'd sleep in his parents' room because his mom was feeling anxious in a foreign country. Emma spent her final night in Paris alone, pondering not only the view of the City of Lights, but also the future of their relationship. Once back home, Emma tried to talk about feeling disrespected and ignored. Lucas downplayed her concerns. "You're overreacting. Family always comes first." 3 weeks later, Emma ended the relationship. "I realized I'd never be a priority in his life," she wrote to me. "In 3 years together, he never set any healthy boundaries with his parents, and I'd always come in second place." 6 months later, Emma met someone who respects her space and her needs. Lucas, on the other hand, is still living with his parents at 30, still unable to cut the umbilical cord that smothers his relationships. This story resonates with many of us who have dealt with people who can't set healthy boundaries with family. Just like my situation with Jennifer, it's all about respecting space. In this case, emotional and relational instead of physical. The second story comes from Miguel, a 34-year-old gay man who grew up in a very religious family in the countryside. When he came out at 19, his parents completely rejected him. His older brother, Rodrigo, seemed to go along with their decision and cut ties as well. Miguel built his own life in the big city, graduated in architecture, established a solid career, and found a loving partner. 15 years went by without any contact with his family of origin. On an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, Miguel received an unexpected message on LinkedIn. "It's me, Rodrigo. Can we talk?" After a lot of hesitation, Miguel agreed to meet for coffee with his brother. He discovered that Rodrigo had distanced himself from their parents 8 years earlier, after realizing how cruel and unfair their treatment of Miguel had been. "It took me a long time to understand," Rodrigo confessed, his eyes welling up. "The church, our community, everything made me believe our parents were right. But when I had my own kids, I started to question, would I be capable of rejecting my own son for who he is?" The answer was a resounding no. Rodrigo explained that for years he had been looking for Miguel, but without success, until he finally found his professional profile online. "I'm not asking you to forgive our parents or even me. I just want you to know I've been telling my kids about Uncle Miguel, the talented architect who designs amazing buildings. They're curious to meet you." Cautiously, Miguel allowed Rodrigo back into his life. He met his nieces and nephews, open and affectionate kids who embraced him wholeheartedly. He also met Rodrigo's wife, who had been instrumental in changing her husband's views. "She grew up with a gay brother," Rodrigo explained. "When I started repeating what our parents said about you, she confronted me directly about my prejudice. It was like a reality check." 2 years later, Miguel and his partner are regular guests at Rodrigo's family birthdays and celebrations. The parents still keep their distance, stuck in their religious convictions, but Miguel found healing in the restored relationship with his brother. "I learned that people can change," Miguel wrote. "Rodrigo set boundaries with our parents, choosing not to perpetuate their prejudice. I set my own boundaries, letting Rodrigo return to my life gradually, on my own terms." These stories, along with my own experience with Jennifer, show different sides of the same issue: the importance of setting and respecting boundaries. In my case, it was the physical limits of property. For Emma, emotional limits in a relationship. For Miguel, the boundary between acceptance and self-preservation. Psychologist Henry Cloud, an expert in healthy boundaries, once said, "Boundaries define who we are and who we're not." When Jennifer tried to encroach on my space, she was essentially saying that her needs outweighed my rights. When Lucas's parents invaded his romantic vacation, they were asserting that their preferences were more important than their son's relationship. And when Miguel's parents rejected him, they declared that their religious beliefs came before unconditional love. In every case, the solution came by setting clear boundaries and being willing to defend them. I replaced the door with a concrete wall. Emma ended an unbalanced relationship. Miguel allowed a reconciliation, but on his own terms. It's fascinating how our society often romanticizes the sacrifice of personal boundaries. We're taught that loving means giving in, that family always comes first, that sharing is always virtuous. These ideas, although well-intentioned, can be twisted to justify abusive or manipulative behaviors. Jennifer truly believed she had a right to my space. Lucas probably thought he was being a good son by putting his parents first. And Miguel's parents likely saw their rejection as upholding sacred values. Strong conviction in our own justifications often blinds us to the harm we cause. True growth happens when we recognize that boundaries aren't walls built to keep people out, but clear guidelines that allow for healthy relationships. Alexander and Olivia understood this immediately, proposing a partnership with the proper contracts and mutual respect. Emma's new partner recognizes the importance of her emotional space. Rodrigo learned to question the harmful beliefs he had absorbed. I regularly get messages from viewers sharing their own stories of violated and restored boundaries. One woman described how she had to install locks in her cabinets because her mother-in-law rearranged her kitchen during visits. A teacher recounted having to confront parents who demanded constant access via texts, even during class. A young man explained how he set specific hours for calls with his overprotective mom. Every story reinforces one universal truth: our well-being depends on our ability to define our space, physical, emotional, and mental, and our courage to defend it when needed. If you're facing your own Jennifer, someone who insists that their needs come before your limits, remember, you have the right to set your own boundaries. It might be uncomfortable and cause temporary conflict, but the alternative is letting others decide who you are and what you deserve. As I learned in my battle for the carpentry workshop, sometimes you need to build a metaphorical, or literal in my case, concrete wall to protect what's rightfully yours. And as Alexander and Olivia showed, truly good relationships are built on mutual respect and clear boundaries. If this story resonated with you, or if you have your own experience to share, leave a comment below. This community grows through our collective experiences and the support we offer each other. Subscribe to the channel and hit like to access more stories like this. And if you enjoyed this episode of Story Slices, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss our next stories. Next week, I'll share the incredible tale of a man who discovered that his best friend had been secretly sabotaging his relationships for over a decade. Until then, remember, your boundaries matter. Defending them isn't selfish, it's self-respect.